guys, Coach Amy here. I'm a certified nutrition coach if you are not aware. And we're going to talk about smart snacking today. We're hoping this will be the first of a series because I know that there are some hot button topics that members want to get into when it comes to nutrition and having a more improved relationship with food. So today's topic is going to be smart snacking, enhancing your diet without restrictions. This will be just a little short presentation to give you sort of the cliff notes of what you need to know without getting into the nitty gritty of it all, with actionable steps to help you get started and make some of these changes ASAP. So snacking is defined as eating a small amount of food between meals. Based on this definition, snacking should be viewed as a necessary part of your daily food consumption, and we'll get into why in a bit. In practice, most people actually see it as a hindrance to developing better nutritional habits, hence why we're even doing this presentation. A lot of people expressed an interest in learning how to snack better because it is sort of interpreted as a bit of a deterrent when it comes to bettering your relationship with food. So in this presentation, we'll dive into why that might be. What we're going to cover today: common struggles, things that people kind of experience with snacking; 2, restrictive eating; 3, principles of smart snacking; 4, examples of smart snacks; 5, practical tips and strategies; and then 6, next steps. So we're going to give you some sort of starter habits that you can implement into your life. Common struggles. Firstly, food quality. Most of us are reaching for tasty foods that don't necessarily satiate or fill us up when we're hungry and maybe waiting a little too long between meals, which again, we're going to get into in a bit. When you're sort of hungry and ravenous and you didn't plan the best, oftentimes we're going to consume more than we set out to. Also, if we're eating hyper-palatable foods, that's looking at the food quality. What tends to happen is we're choosing foods that taste really delicious, which are often made to have that as the sole function of them, as opposed to having any nutrients in them. So we end up consuming more than we set out to because we aren't consuming the kinds of nutrients that will fill us up. Relying on willpower. Willpower is very fickle. We cannot rely on it in the same way we can't necessarily rely on motivation in order to work out consistently. We're not always going to be motivated. Sometimes we just need to implement a habit in order to do the thing that's going to be best for us. So often we intend to eat a small portion with the expectation that we will be able to stop ourselves once satisfied, but we can't always use fullness as a cue for satisfaction with a meal. You almost want to fuel yourself correctly, and it will make it easier to listen to your body and your hunger cues. Lack of preparation. Fail to prepare, prepare to fail. Unfortunately, this is very true. If we are not dialed in, or at least paying attention to the food that's in our home, the kind of foods that exist when we're in the grocery store and planning ahead before we go to the grocery store, if we're not thinking about or factoring in how time is of the essence, and often we don't have a lot of it. We're all very busy. Life can get away from us, and we'll choose the very accessible, convenient options. And sometimes those are, unfortunately, not foods that are of a certain quality that will help us to feel full and continue to make good decisions throughout our day, or better decisions throughout our day when it comes to our nutrition. So preparation. This does not mean you're having to meal prep for an entire Sunday afternoon. That's not the expectation. Some sort of preparation in general for making strategic, smart decisions is kind of the baseline here. Food restriction. Eliminating or restricting foods you love in order to be considered healthy, which is what a lot of us do, can lead to overeating. So it just becomes sort of cyclical. And often people are doing it in secret because there's shame around it, which we're going to get more into in the next slide. So restrictive eating. It is a common strategy for those that believe healthy eating requires limiting food intake by quantity and variety. So what do we mean by that? A lot of people will think, okay, on the weekends, I like to consume as much as I feel like. A lot of people use the term cheat days, which I'm not a huge fan of, only because we tend to think that we can binge eat during those days, and then we have to restrict on all of the other days. And that's not necessarily the most balanced approach. And we always want to approach nutrition in a balanced fashion. And restrictive eating is sort of the antithesis of that. So, a lot of the time when we're limiting food by quantity, if you're not someone who understands how much you need to be consuming, we're consuming far less than we need to. And then that turns into a domino effect of other issues. Also, if we're limiting food intake by variety for whatever reason it might be, whether it's a diet fad that's existing or for whatever other reason there might be, oftentimes people are just eliminating things because it doesn't agree with them, which is totally fine. But if we're limiting food intake by variety, we sometimes are missing out on certain food groups that contain nutrients that are very necessary for being able to listen to our body and our hunger cues. So it often leads to, when we restricted eat, insufficient nutrient intake, disordered eating patterns, and psychological stress related to food. Lots of guilt and shame around food, and stress if we do consume the things that we're trying to restrict. The more you villainize or eliminate specific food groups, the more likely you are to overeat them when the opportunity arises. Also, underconsumption typically ends up leading to poor hormone regulation. It leads to higher stress, increased difficulty in listening to hunger cues, and it also results in a lack of energy, among other things that are not going to work in your favor when it comes to trying to snack smarter. So here are the principles of smart snacking. So this is more of a sort of like umbrella overview of some things that we want to do, some principles to put in place when you're building snacks throughout your day or the day before, because we like to prepare. So firstly, the most important thing is to focus on your protein intake. The reason being is that it's the most satiating macronutrient. It helps to build muscle mass. It's great for hormone regulation, less cravings, better sleep, less stress. All very good things that, again, help with that cyclical issue that most people have with not maybe choosing the right snacks. That can impact so many different things. In the same way, protein will help to sort of reverse all of that. My suggestion is that you aim to consume at least 100 grams of protein per day, at the very least. If you want to get into more specifics of how much you can consume, we can book in with me and we can have a chat about that. However, I think as a baseline for most people, if you're not really consuming that much protein to start, 100 grams is a great baseline to work towards. Number 2, add, don't subtract. If you have a favorite food that you tend to overindulge in, add a protein source or nutrient-dense food to create a more balanced snack. So an example that I put here was, if you're going to have one portion of potato chips, maybe try serving them with some chopped veggies and a tall glass of water. The water is going to help to fill you up a little bit. The veggies are going to provide a nutrient-dense element that's going to fill you up a little bit more. And the potato chips is still allowing you to kind of satiate that craving that you're having. It's also helping you to be more balanced in your approach and your relationship with food. Because again, there is that psychological element that we want to tap into, and it doesn't bring about that novelty component to putting certain foods as I can only have this in certain circumstances. You can have it some of the time, but how can we strategize in a way that's going to make it so that we're getting more out of the snack, essentially? Thirdly, eat frequently throughout your day. Studies have shown that eating every 2 to 3 hours helps to prevent binge/overeating. The longer you go between meals and snacks, the harder it is to recognize hunger cues. We've all been in this scenario where maybe we've gone a prolonged period of time without eating for whatever reason it might be. Again, life gets very busy. In those cases, we often come home, we are ravenous. Going through all of our cupboards, seeing what is the quickest thing that we can consume. We're normally eating something while something's toasting or cooking or whatever it might be. And it tends to just be a moment of not recognizing how hungry you actually are. It's, again, harder to practice willpower. So in these cases, there are plenty of studies that back eating every 2 to 3 hours because you're able to keep your body in that state of having enough nutrients, but also being satisfied. 4, eat mindfully. Be intentional about what you're consuming. Steer clear of harmless handfuls. Listen, you don't have to be neurotic about all of this. However, these things do add up. If we are grabbing full handfuls out of bags, these are the sort of things that kind of keep us from being strategic about our snacking if that's the main thing we want to focus on. A lot of the time, a handful is more than you think that you are consuming. And nutrition is not all about calories, but when it comes to making smarter decisions, if we are making consistent decisions to grab harmless handfuls, again, that will just add up throughout your day. And the less aware you are of how much you're consuming and the less intentional you are, the harder time you're going to have in general when it comes to making better decisions. So, smart snack ideas. These are things you can consume alone or pair with something else to make it a more well-rounded snack if you so choose. So, a high protein grab and go snack, I think that's the best thing for most people because everybody is busy. You want something that you don't really have to think twice about. It's already ready to go. Preferably something that doesn't have to be refrigerated, but that's not necessarily a requirement. It's just a helpful thing for you when it comes to convenience. So protein bars, pre-made protein shakes, protein chips, high quality jerky, deli meat. Don't steer clear of all of these things. These things are great for you to have on hand. I know that a lot of people have opinions about deli meat. It is not reasonable to expect everyone to have grass-fed, organic, whatever it might be. You have to be realistic here. If you're typically taking a grab and go snack from the vending machine and maybe it's not the best quality and it doesn't have protein in it at all, we're not going to get very much from it. And if we're having processed food in general, having something like deli meat is great because it is higher in protein and extremely convenient. High protein dairy. This is something that I would recommend we combine with other things. Cottage cheese, that can be fat-free or otherwise. I would recommend fat-free because you can add in fat in another way. You can control your fat a little bit better. Greek yogurt, so you can add berries, protein powder, or even a portion of your favorite sweet treat. So I, on a nightly basis, have Greek yogurt. I mix in a serving of protein powder. I add some frozen blueberries. You can add in whatever fruit you like if that's your thing. And then I add in a serving of some sort of chocolate that I love. I love Reese Minis, my favorite thing. And then I drizzle over top some 1 serving of melted peanut butter. Again, as much as it's measured and very intentional, it's still flexible. So I have a complete understanding that Reese Minis are not high quality food, but I'm pairing it with a very high protein bowl of something. And if I was to just have ice cream and Reese Minis, I'm not going to be filled up in the same way I am if I have a very high protein meal. So that's sort of the rationale there. I would highly encourage you to try it and incorporate your own favorites to enjoy it as much as you possibly can. And then the last thing I put was hard-boiled eggs. They actually sell these now in packages that you can take them to go. You don't even have to do the work of boiling them and whatever it might be. So that's something that you can factor in as an option. Foods high in fiber. This is also a nutrient that's going to fill you up. Strawberries, pomegranate, broccoli, carrots, oatmeal, bananas, almonds. Again, you add those in conjunction with something else. You could even do strawberries with almonds. You can do cottage cheese with strawberries. And then you're getting optimal nutrition if you're adding all of these things together. Lastly, foods high on the satiety index. So that is a tool that ranks different foods on their ability to satisfy hunger, which is what we all want at the end of the day. That's what we want to get out of our snacks. That's why we're eating them. We want to feel like we got a lot out of it, out of the snacks, out of our meals, everything. So popcorn is super high on that list. Apples, oranges, all of the above rank high on the index, actually. And then I also encourage you to think outside of the box with snacks. You're allowed to have things that would typically be consumed in a meal as a snack. Boiled potatoes are delicious. I think potatoes in any form are delicious, but potatoes are super high on the satiety index as well. And then having just any general protein. So if you made chicken the night before and you want that as a snack, do it up. That's totally up to you. There's no rules to this. As long as it's like a small little meal to tie you over, it doesn't even have to be small necessarily, but intentional is key. Practical tips and strategies. So what I would say is, if you're going to take notes on this probably. When it comes to implementing smart snacking, something I really value is comparing food items in the grocery store. I've been doing this a long time, so I'm very familiar with how to do this and taking my time in the grocery store. If grocery store or if grocery shopping isn't really your thing, I can understand how this would be tedious, but this is something I do recommend. It goes or falls in line with being intentional. If you're reaching for something that's processed or in a package, so say you're looking at a type of chip, take a second to compare similar items sold by different brands. Does one have more protein and maybe contain better ingredients? Is one significantly more calorie dense than the other? Something to consider. So, again, calories are something that some people have no interest in looking at. They just want to make better choices with their snacking. So you don't necessarily have to look at your calories. However, in this case, I would say maybe look at the ingredients. If there are 10 or more ingredients, but one package has like less than that, and maybe the ingredients are better for you, a little bit more natural, they contain some of the things that we spoke about within the first part of this presentation, then that's great. If you do want to have a glance at the calories, I would say maybe mostly look at the protein and then look at the ingredients as well. If you're going to have something processed anyway, I really don't think there's a harm in looking at portion sizing and how much you'd be consuming if you were to have it. So if I'm looking at potato chips because I like the crisp and crunchiness of it, that's also something you can do. Look at the element of the snack that you like and try to emulate it in another way that's maybe a little bit better for you. I personally love the brand Crispy Minis. They make really good products that satisfy that crunch, that chip craving that I might have. And I can get that for far less calories. So then I can maybe have a bigger portion and then I can combine it with maybe veggies or whatever it might be, something higher in protein. It is worthwhile to take the time to compare products. Not necessarily like comparing the numbers so meticulously, but it is good to be mindful of brands and of what options exist. Hydration first. Have a glass of water before snacking to accurately assess hunger. Oftentimes, I'm sure you've heard this a million times over, we think we're hungry, or at least hungrier than we actually are. You have a glass of water, it helps to kind of bring you back to earth a little bit, especially when you're sort of ravenous. Fix yourself a plate or a bowl. Our awareness of how much we're consuming is often stunted by grabbing harmless handfuls straight out of the package. So I sort of touched on harmless handfuls before. The reason being, and the reason why I talk about this so much, I have always found, at least for myself and with several other people that I have worked with, if you grab a package and you're eating directly out of it, your awareness is completely different than if you were to pull out a portion and put it into a bowl and put the bag away. You're way more likely to, again, eat with intention and mindfulness if you pull out a plate or a bowl. This also goes for social gatherings because I think we mostly are just getting into the bits and the bites. We're not necessarily always having a big meal if we're going to, a cocktail hour or something of the sort. If there is a table that has charcuterie or a shrimp ring or a veggie platter or just a spread in general, lots of good stuff. The second that you fix yourself a plate or a bowl and you say, I am going to eat what I have fixed for myself, you can toss a brownie on there. But I also want you to toss some nutrient dense elements that are going to help you to feel full from that portion that you fixed for yourself. That is almost always going to be better than if you are just picking off the plate. Again, we don't have a visual for how much we're consuming when we're sort of willy-nilly just grabbing a harmless handful. Again, there's always a time and a place for this. there's no shame around eating off of someone else's plate. But if we're trying to be more mindful, that's just a tip that I found to be the best. Even if you have one plate and eat off of it and you finish it and you kind of think, okay, I'm still hungry, fix yourself another plate and remember, okay, maybe I should be leaning more into the protein options that are on the table and have a bottle of water, a glass of water, whatever is provided, and use that as a marker for, again, how much you're consuming. So you're still going to be better off, even if you had 2 full plates of food, than if you were to eat directly from the table. Again, it's just because you are unaware of how much you're consuming when you're just taking things off the table. Change your environment. Keep healthy snacks visible and accessible. So I am a huge fan of still keeping food in the house that maybe you love, but you have a hard time necessarily exercising your willpower with. I think it's important to exercise that. What's the word I'm looking for? It's hard to hold back from reaching for it and consuming way more than you intend to for all the things that we've talked about. I also think sometimes you do need to eliminate obstacles preventing you from making healthier, better informed choices. So if there's something that you know you just don't have the kind of self-control required for, then remove it from your house if you need to. But I do think using those things and still allowing them into your life so that you can almost take that power back, consume them with other healthier things, you'll be better set up. However, I think keeping healthy snacks visible and accessible means that you're more likely to reach for it. That's sort of the rationale behind that. So what comes next? Here are some realistic, actionable steps to start snacking smarter today. The last was what we're kind of aiming to do on a more general basis, whereas this, I think, is what you want to start with. So firstly, consume one protein source every time you have a meal or a snack. This is going to make your life so much easier. In terms of feeling satiated by each meal and snack that you have, this will also help you to get to that 100 grams. So it's sort of working in conjunction with that. Number 2, assess the snacks that you currently have at home. This kind of falls in line with that preparation points that we talked about previously. Can you incorporate the snacks you have at home by following the smart snacking principles? So can you add, not subtract? Or do you think maybe it's something that needs to be eliminated from the equation? Grocery shop to stock up on smarter snacks that you'll enjoy and put those hard to resist snacks out of sight. So maybe you can keep it at home so that you can do that add, don't subtract principle into your life, but maybe you keep it completely out of eye shot so you have to go and look for it. I find the more visible it is, the more likely you are to consume it or want to consume it. 3, when you overindulge, reflect on the who, what, where, when, and why. Context really matters here. And sometimes you need to make adjustments in your life. It does not mean you have to cut people out, but it can also mean maybe you're having conversations with the people in your life that are likely to bring donuts to your home on a Saturday morning. Donuts are not bad. It can more so just be a contextual thing that gives you an understanding of, is there a pattern in my life that maybe needs to be tweaked a little bit or looked at so that I'm not consistently making decisions that aren't in line with my goals. So who are you with? What were you doing? Are you consistently hanging out with people and maybe perpetuating habits that you're looking to break? What were you doing? What were you thinking about? So sometimes we overindulge or snack more when we are stressed or emotional. That's something that we really want to look at and reflect on if we're going to make some changes, because I think you can catch yourself and course correct a little bit better when you're aware of where it's coming from. How are you feeling? Again, that's sort of tied into the last. Where were you? Again, context matters. Sometimes depending on where you work, what you do on your off time, what you're surrounded by. If, again, some of these principles are or these tips and tricks are a little bit harder to accomplish if maybe you're consistently having your break in the break room and the room is filled with snacks that are very hard to hold back from. So again, do I need to remove myself from the environment? Do I need to maybe suggest that we incorporate more nutrient dense foods in the break room? Whatever it might be, again, this reflection can only be a benefit to you. And when did it happen? Is it something that happens in the evenings? Is it something that you do throughout your day? Having an awareness of the timing of things can also help to bring about better habits. So that is bringing us to the end of the presentation, guys. Thank you for joining me. If you have any further questions and you see me around the gym, feel free to ask. But I think starting with some of these tips and tricks should really get you to a good place. And I think I will say this about everything when it comes to nutrition. Consistency is key. And sometimes it's imperfect consistency, but making small changes throughout your day, throughout your week even, they will help bring you to a place of progress, regardless of how imperfect it is. It's better than doing nothing. Even taking one portion of this presentation and implementing it into your life, there should be a significant difference, in my opinion. And that's what I've seen with clients that I've worked with. So I hope that this has been helpful, and I hope you have a lovely day.